The new god of lying. The new gods of lying. The new god of lying. The new goddess of lying. The new goddesses of lying. The new goddess of lying. The old god of lying. The old gods of lying. The old god of lying. The old goddess of lying. The old goddesses of lying. The old goddess of lying. The greater god of lying. The greater gods of lying. The greater god of lying. The greater goddess of lying. The greater goddesses of lying. The greater goddess of lying. The lesser god of lying. The lesser gods of lying. The lesser god of lying. The lesser goddess of lying. The lesser goddesses of lying. The lesser goddess of lying. The higher god of lying. The higher gods of lying. The higher god of lying. The higher goddess of lying. The higher goddesses of lying. The higher goddess of lying. The lower god of lying. The lower gods of lying. The lower god of lying. The lower goddess of lying. The lower goddesses of lying. The lower goddess of lying. The greater spirit of lying. The greater spirits of lying. The greater spirit of lying. The lesser spirit of lying. The lesser spirits of lying. The lesser spirit of lying. The higher spirit of lying. The higher spirits of lying. The higher spirit of lying. The lower spirit of lying. The lower spirits of lying. The lower spirit of lying. The major god of lying. The major gods of lying. The major god of lying. The major goddess of lying. The major goddesses of lying. The major goddess of lying. The minor god of lying. The minor gods of lying. The minor god of lying. The minor goddess of lying. The minor goddesses of lying. The minor goddess of lying. The superior god of lying. The superior gods of lying. The superior god of lying. The superior goddess of lying. The superior goddesses of lying. The superior goddess of lying. The inferior god of lying. The inferior gods of lying. The inferior god of lying. The inferior goddess of lying. The inferior goddesses of lying. The inferior goddess of lying. The ancestor god of lying. The ancestor gods of lying. The ancestor god of lying. The ancestor goddess of lying. The ancestor goddesses of lying. The ancestor goddess of lying. The ascendant god of lying. The ascendant gods of lying. The ascendant god of lying. The ascendant goddess of lying. The ascendant goddesses of lying. The ascendant goddess of lying. The descendant god of lying. The descendant gods of lying. The descendant god of lying. The descendant goddess of lying. The descendant goddesses of lying. The descendant goddess of lying. The transcendent god of lying. The transcendent gods of lying. The transcendent god of lying. The transcendent goddess of lying. The transcendent goddesses of lying. The transcendent goddess of lying. The past god of lying. The past gods of lying. The past god of lying. The past goddess of lying. The past goddesses of lying. The past goddess of lying. The present god of lying. The present gods of lying. The present god of lying. The present goddess of lying. The present goddesses of lying. The present goddess of lying. The future god of lying. The future gods of lying. The future god of lying. The future goddess of lying. The future goddesses of lying. The future goddess of lying. The authentic god of lying. The authentic gods of lying. The authentic god of lying. The authentic goddess of lying. The authentic goddesses of lying. The authentic goddess of lying. The synthetic god of lying. The synthetic gods of lying. The synthetic god of lying. The synthetic goddess of lying. The synthetic goddesses of lying. The synthetic goddess of lying. The progressive god of lying. The progressive gods of lying. The progressive god of lying. The progressive goddess of lying. The progressive goddesses of lying. The progressive goddess of lying. The regressive god of lying. The regressive gods of lying. The regressive god of lying. The regressive goddess of lying. The regressive goddesses of lying. The regressive goddess of lying. The ordinary god of lying. The ordinary gods of lying. The ordinary god of lying. The ordinary goddess of lying. The ordinary goddesses of lying. The ordinary goddess of lying. The extraordinary god of lying. The extraordinary gods of lying. The extraordinary god of lying. The extraordinary goddess of lying. The extraordinary goddesses of lying. The extraordinary goddess of lying. The static god of lying. The static gods of lying. The static god of lying. The static goddess of lying. The static goddesses of lying. The static goddess of lying. The dynamic god of lying. The dynamic gods of lying. The dynamic god of lying. The dynamic goddess of lying. The dynamic goddesses of lying. The dynamic goddess of lying. The land god of lying. The land gods of lying. The land god of lying. The land goddess of lying. The land goddesses of lying. The land goddess of lying. The sea god of lying. The sea gods of lying. The sea god of lying. The sea goddess of lying. The sea goddesses of lying. The sea goddess of lying. The sky god of lying. The sky gods of lying. The sky god of lying. The sky goddess of lying. The sky goddesses of lying. The sky goddess of lying. The god of lying. The gods of lying. The god of lying. The goddess of lying. The goddesses of lying. The goddess of lying. The half god of lying. The half gods of lying. The half god of lying. The half goddess of lying. The half goddesses of lying. The half goddess of lying. The vessel of lying. The vessels of lying. The vessel of lying. The name of lying. The names of lying. The name of lying. The person of lying. The persons of lying. The person of lying. The persona of lying. The personas of lying. The persona of lying. The personage of lying. The personages of lying. The personage of lying. The personality of lying. The personalities of lying. The personality of lying. The personification of lying. The personifications of lying. The personification of lying. The image of lying. The images of lying. The image of lying. The imagination of lying. The imaginations of lying. The imagination of lying. The belief of lying. The beliefs of lying. The belief of lying. The thought of lying. The thoughts of lying. The thought of lying. The word of lying. The words of lying. The word of lying. The action of lying. The actions of lying. The action of lying. The reaction of lying. The reactions of lying. The reaction of lying. The feeling of lying. The feelings of lying. The feeling of lying. The situation of lying. The situations of lying. The situation of lying. The circumstance of lying. The circumstances of lying. The circumstance of lying. The environment of lying. The environments of lying. The environment of lying. The relationship of lying. The relationships of lying. The relationship of lying. The number of lying. The numbers of lying. The number of lying. The formula of lying. The formulas of lying. The formula of lying. The equation of lying. The equations of lying. The equation of lying. The theory of lying. The theories of lying. The theory of lying. The symbol of lying. The symbols of lying. The symbol of lying. The color of lying. The colors of lying. The color of lying. The thing of lying. The things of lying. The thing of lying. The way of lying. The ways of lying. The way of lying. The place of lying. The places of lying. The place of lying. The time of lying. The times of lying. The time of lying. The event of lying. The events of lying. The event of lying. The result of lying. The results of lying. The result of lying. The crown of lying. The crowns of lying. The crown of lying. The throne of lying. The thrones of lying. The throne of lying. The Lion King. The Lion Kings. The Lion Kingdom. The Lion Kingdoms. The Lion King's subject. The Lion King's subjects. The Lion King's dominion. The lying king's dominions, the kingdom of lying. The kingdoms of lying. The kingdom of lying. The lying queen. The lying queens. The lying queendom. The lying queendoms. The lying queen's subject. The lying queen's subjects. The lying queen's dominion. The lying queen's dominions, the queendom of lying. The queendoms of lying. The queendom of lying. The lying prince. The lying princes. The lying princedom. The lying princedoms. The lying prince's subject. The lying prince's subjects. The lying prince's dominion. The lying prince's dominions, the princedom of lying. The princedoms of lying. The princedom of lying. The lying princess. The lying princesses. The lying princessdom. The lying princessdoms. The lying princess's subject. The lying princess's subjects. The lying princess's dominion. The lying princess's dominions, the princessdom of lying. The princessdoms of lying. The princessdom of lying, the lord of lying. The lords of lying. The lord of lying, the lordess of lying. The lordesses of lying. The lordess of lying, the priest of lying. The priests of lying. The priest of lying, the priestess of lying. The priestesses of lying. The priestess of lying, the ritual of lying. The rituals of lying. The ritual of lying, the shrine of lying. The shrines of lying. The shrine of lying, the temple of lying. The temples of lying. The temple of lying, the leader of lying. The leaders of lying. The leader of lying, the follower of lying. The followers of lying. The follower of lying, the natural substance of lying. The natural substances of lying. The natural substance of lying, the supernatural substance of lying. The supernatural substances of lying. The supernatural substance of lying, the temporal substance of lying. The temporal substances of lying. The temporal substance of lying, the spiritual substance of lying. The spiritual substances of lying. The spiritual substance of lying, the natural form of lying. The natural forms of lying. The natural form of lying, the supernatural form of lying. The supernatural forms of lying. The supernatural form of lying, the temporal form of lying. The temporal forms of lying. The temporal form of lying, the spiritual form of lying. The spiritual forms of lying. The spiritual form of lying, the age of lying. The ages of lying. The age of lying, the era of lying. The heiress of lying. The era of lying, the awakener of lying. The awakeners of lying. The awakener of lying, the awakening of lying. The awakenings of lying. The awakening of lying, the realm of lying. The realms of lying. The realm of lying, the dimension of lying. The dimensions of lying. The dimension of lying, the zone of lying. The zones of lying. The zone of lying, the frequency of lying. The frequencies of lying. The frequency of lying, the century of lying. The centuries of lying. The century of lying, the millennium of lying. The millenniums of lying. The millennium of lying, the purpose of lying. The purposes of lying. The purpose of lying, the meaning of lying. The meanings of lying. The meaning of lying, the culture of lying. The cultures of lying. The culture of lying, the demonstrator of lying. The demonstrators of lying. The demonstrator of lying, the demonstration of lying. The demonstrations of lying. The demonstration of lying, the manifester of lying. The manifestors of lying. The manifester of lying, the manifestation of lying. The manifestations of lying. The manifestation of lying, the presence of lying. The presences of lying. The presence of lying, the glow of lying. The glows of lying. The glow of lying, the goal of lying. The goals of lying. The goal of lying, the plan of lying. The plans of lying. The plan of lying, the book of lying. The books of lying. The book of lying, the philosopher of lying. The philosophers of lying. The philosopher of lying. The philosophy of lying. The philosophies of lying. The philosophy of lying. The releaser of lying. The releasers of lying. The releaser of lying. The release of lying. The releases of lying. The release of lying. The variable of lying. The variables of lying. The variable of lying. The cause of lying. The causes of lying. The cause of lying. The effect of lying. The effects of lying. The effect of lying. The journey of lying. The journeys of lying. The journey of lying. The emergence of lying. The emergences of lying. The emergence of lying. The source of lying. The sources of lying. The source of lying. The originator of lying. The originators of lying. The originator of lying. The origin of lying. The origins of lying. The origin of lying. The forefather of lying. The forefathers of lying. The forefather of lying. The foremother of lying. The foremothers of lying. The foremother of lying. The ancestor of lying. The ancestors of lying. The ancestor of lying. The descendant of lying. The descendants of lying. The descendant of lying. The lineage of lying. The lineages of lying. The lineage of lying. The heritage of lying. The heritages of lying. The heritage of lying. The heir of lying. The heirs of lying. The heir of lying. The co-heir of lying. The co-heirs of lying. The co-heir of lying. The joint heir of lying. The joint heirs of lying. The joint heir of lying. The dynasty of lying. The dynasties of lying. The dynasty of lying. The force of lying. The forces of lying. The force of lying. The law of lying. The laws of lying. The law of lying. The pact of lying. The pacts of lying. The pact of lying. The game of lying. The games of lying. The game of lying. The mask of lying. The masks of lying. The mask of lying. The armor of lying. The armors of lying. The armor of lying. The sword of lying. The swords of lying. The sword of lying. The shield of lying. The shields of lying. The shield of lying. The force shield of lying. The force shields of lying. The force shield of lying. The armored force shield of lying. The armored force shields of lying. The armored force shield of lying. The champion of lying. The champions of lying. The champion of lying. The guardian of lying. The guardians of lying. The guardian of lying. The defender of lying. The defenders of lying. The defender of lying. The protector of lying. The protectors of lying. The protector of lying. The chant of lying. The chants of lying. The chant of lying. The shape of lying. The shapes of lying. The shape of lying. The cube of lying. The cubes of lying. The cube of lying. The cuboid of lying. The cuboids of lying. The cuboid of lying. The sphere of lying. The spheres of lying. The sphere of lying. The spheroid of lying. The spheroids of lying. The spheroid of lying. The prism of lying. The prisms of lying. The prism of lying. The pyramid of lying. The pyramids of lying. The pyramid of lying. The cylinder of lying. The cylinders of lying. The cylinder of lying. The cone of lying. The cones of lying. The cone of lying. The triangle of lying. The triangles of lying. The triangle of lying. The circle of lying. The circles of lying. The circle of lying. The semicircle of lying. The semicircles of lying. The semicircle of lying. The square of lying. The squares of lying. The square of lying. The rectangle of lying. The rectangles of lying. The rectangle of lying. The parallelogram of lying. The parallelograms of lying. The parallelogram of lying. The rhombus of lying. The rhombuses of lying. The rhombus of lying. The trapezoid of lying. The trapezoids of lying. The trapezoid of lying. The polygon of lying. The polygons of lying. The polygon of lying. The pentagon of lying. The pentagons of lying. The pentagon of lying. The hexagon of lying. The hexagons of lying. The hexagon of lying. The septagon of lying. The septagons of lying. The septagon of lying. The octagon of lying. The octagons of lying. The octagon of lying. The nonagon of lying. The nonagons of lying. The nonagon of lying. The decagon of lying. The decagons of lying. The decagon of lying. The evolution of lying. The evolutions of lying. The evolution of lying. The revolution of lying. The revolutions of lying. The revolution of lying. The elemental art of lying. The elemental arts of lying. The elemental art of lying. The elemental science of lying. The elemental sciences of lying. The elemental science of lying. The elemental principle of lying. The elemental principles of lying. The elemental principle of lying. The elemental technology of lying. The elemental technologies of lying. The elemental technology of lying. The low elemental art of lying. The low elemental arts of lying. The low elemental art of lying. The low elemental science of lying. The low elemental sciences of lying. The low elemental science of lying. The low elemental principle of lying. The low elemental principles of lying. The low elemental principle of lying. The low elemental technology of lying. The low elemental technologies of lying. The low elemental technology of lying. The high elemental art of lying. The high elemental arts of lying. The high elemental art of lying. The high elemental science of lying. The high elemental sciences of lying. The high elemental science of lying. The high elemental principle of lying. The high elemental principles of lying. The high elemental principle of lying. The high elemental technology of lying. The high elemental technologies of lying. The high elemental technology of lying. The agent of lying. The agents of lying. The agent of lying. The agency of lying. The agencies of lying. The agency of lying. The amplifier of lying. The amplifiers of lying. The amplifier of lying. The amplification of lying. The amplifications of lying. The amplification of lying. The enhancer of lying. The enhancers of lying. The enhancer of lying. The enhancement of lying. The enhancements of lying. The enhancement of lying. The magnifier of lying. The magnifiers of lying. The magnifier of lying. The magnification of lying. The magnifications of lying. The magnification of lying. The influencer of lying. The influencers of lying. The influencer of lying. The influence of lying. The influences of lying. The influence of lying. The emanator of lying. The emanators of lying. The emanator of lying. The emanation of lying. The emanations of lying. The emanation of lying. The converger of lying. The convergers of lying. The converger of lying. The convergence of lying. The convergences of lying. The convergence of lying. The aura of lying. The auras of lying. The aura of lying. The impression of lying. The impressions of lying. The impression of lying. The intelligence of lying. The intelligences of lying. The intelligence of lying. The sophistication of lying. The sophistications of lying. The sophistication of lying. The genius of lying. The geniuses of lying. The genius of lying. The polymath of lying. The polymaths of lying. The polymath of lying. The psychic of lying. The psychics of lying. The psychic of lying. The knowledge of lying. The knowledges of lying. The knowledge of lying. The understanding of lying. The understandings of lying. The understanding of lying. The wisdom of lying. The wisdoms of lying. The wisdom of lying. The secret of lying. The secrets of lying. The secret of lying. The mystery of lying. The mysteries of lying. The mystery of lying. The revelation of lying. The revelations of lying. The revelation of lying. The tactic of lying. The tactics of lying. The tactic of lying. The strategy of lying. The strategies of lying. The strategy of lying. The strength of lying. The strengths of lying. The strength of lying. The might of lying. The might of lying. The might of lying. The power of lying. The powers of lying. The power of lying. The authority of lying. The authorities of lying. The authority of lying. The dominion of lying. The dominions of lying. The dominion of lying. The rhythm of lying. The rhythms of lying. The rhythm of lying. The melody of lying. The melodies of lying. The melody of lying. The music of lying. The musics of lying. The music of lying. The lyric of lying. The lyrics of lying. The lyric of lying. The song of lying. The songs of lying. The song of lying. The dance of lying. The dances of lying. The dance of lying. The spirit of lying. The spirits of lying. The spirit of lying. The soul of lying. The souls of lying. The soul of lying. The body of lying. The bodies of lying. The body of lying. The mark of lying. The marks of lying. The mark of lying. The promise of lying. The promises of lying. The promise of lying. The visionary of lying. The visionaries of lying. The visionary of lying. The vision of lying. The visions of lying. The vision of lying. The picture of lying. The pictures of lying. The picture of lying. The sound of lying. The sounds of lying. The sound of lying. The tongue of lying. The tongues of lying. The tongue of lying. The language of lying. The languages of lying. The language of lying. The communication of lying. The communications of lying. The communication of lying. The people of lying. The peoples of lying. The people of lying. The society of lying. The societies of lying. The society of lying. The fortress of lying. The fortresses of lying. The fortress of lying. The government of lying. The governments of lying. The government of lying. The city of lying. The cities of lying. The city of lying. The nation of lying. The nations of lying. The nation of lying. The civilization of lying. The civilizations of lying. The civilization of lying. The world of lying. The worlds of lying. The world of lying.